three things that most Angelinos hear in regards to a river is that 1, you call that a river? 2, we stole the water. And 3, that we're a desert. Let's just clear these up. First
off, the answer to all three is so what?
So what? Surfboards. First off, we're not a desert. Los Angeles is closer to having what is called a Mediterranean type climate, which produces extremes of surface flow typical of more arid environments, with floodwaters periodically making new streaming channels across the area. In fact, any real...
Like CBS All Access.
You're a funny guy. In fact, any real text about Southern California climate will use the term semi-arid, which some people disagree with, but semi-arid is the second driest climates in the world.
Semi-Aryan in some parts.
That's Orange County. We don't really count that.
Los
California.
Angeles is semi-arid. Orange County is semi-Aryan. Those are the two climates of Southern California.
Yeah. We are the second driest climates in the world after deserts, known for the dry climates. So we're not a desert. We're just shy one climate change catastrophe from being a desert. Semi-arid climates typically receive up to twice the amount of rain that desert regions do, up to 20 inches per year. According to climate types for kids, think of semi-arid as
Ask your parents before you click further.
What's a climate? I don't know. I saw the word mate in it. I don't think it's safe.
Safe search won't let me look up what climate is.
Think of semi-arid as a transition climate between dry and wetter places. These areas can be dangerous. They sometimes receive enough rain
thinking of a place between a dry and a wet place.
Tune into Strange Angel. They sometimes receive enough rain to support some farming, but after a few years, the area can experience a long drought. Sound familiar? So when people say LA is a desert, now you go reply, no, the region is closer to being semi-arid and we have a Mediterranean type climate. So not really, Becky.
Becky from Orange County.
All right, the river.
Heil truth.
Heil science.
Tune into Strange Angel.
People say there's no real river in LA, but the river is the life essence of the city, and it kind of has always been. So Ice Age ends, spoiler alert, solids turn into liquids.
Ice Age 2 begins.
Everyone's
search for Scratch or whatever.
I'm so glad you interrupted that for that. Solids turn into liquids, but also solids. 20 million years ago, most of the southern half of Los Angeles County was covered by seawater, obviously. The ocean had come up to areas like Pasadena, Pomona, and Ventura. And then millions of years pass after that, and the oceans recede. Mountains raise up in the air, and the Los Angeles Basin becomes a series of wetlands and marshes, close to what you see in Bolsa Chica and Huntington Beach, but more of that. There was no actual river because the water that would come into our area naturally wouldn't have any path to exit. There was no connection between where we were, where the water was coming from, and the ocean. So it would just soak in the soil, making ponds and marshes and create beautiful, lush landscape. Early Spanish explorers...
Like Westlake Park.
Like Westlake Park. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Like MacArthur Park. Beautiful.
Naturally created. Complete with sidewalk.
Where do the
Where do the concubines go?
Early Spanish explorers remarked that much of the area looked like Eden. What they meant by that was it was sunny and there was bushes. That's all that really means.
We want to talk about sunny bushes, tune into Strange Angel.
We did have very rich soil, and it made this area, LA County, the most productive agricultural county in the U.S. up to the 50s. That's centuries and thousands and millions away.
Orange groves.
There were streams and creeks and washes and some deposits into the ocean, but nothing significant. There was no main river, just scattered waterways. So where does the water come from? Well, 3 places, really. Short answer, the Santa Monica Mountains, the San Gabriel Mountains, which both push water towards downtown, and it converges near the Elysian Narrows. And the third is a giant underground reservoir underneath the valley. Did you know about that?
Are you talking about the aquifer?
I guess. There was no...
Or are you talking about the lizard people?
I'm talking about lizard people.
And their water supply.
And their water supply. Would they swim in? To answer this...
Lizards love swimming.
We all know that they love to be wet and they hate the sun, which is why they're underground. Lizard people arguments never accounted for that.
What? That lizards love
the sun? Like the sun, and why are they underground?
It's more of a slur. They're not actual.
I didn't realize that. Sorry, I apologize to lizard people.
Tell it to the ground, okay?
So to answer this, I had to watch an educational video for kids on how rivers are made. Okay, so the ocean receded, plates shifted, mountains pushed higher. As they did, they collected rain and snow and precipitation. That collects and streams down mountains, making fresh water flow. That water that collects softens the sediment or the soil at the base of the mountain and could sometimes seep deep into the ground. The valley has a subsurface reservoir. The underground reservoir below the valley is 175 square miles and could hold up to 3.2 million acre feet in quotations of water, roughly 1 trillion gallons. This is one of the larger natural reservoirs in the state. Visualize the valley as a huge bowl that's filled to the brim with water and has tips slightly causing the water to overflow. That overflow is our river. The exit point for this underground reservoir and what some consider the starting point of what was to become the LA River starts in Encino.
It all begins at Midori Sushi.
Cupid's hot dog. So water trickles into the ground and flows southeast with a gentle slope of the terrain of the valley. And when there is too much water, it overflows and comes to the surface. So there's what some people call like an upside down river. So
the surface. You are talking about the aquifer.
I didn't know that was a name for it. I never saw that name in any of the readings.
Well, I guess they don't mention it in the children's reading. They don't talk about it on Nick Jr.
I had to write real fast because this was on the promos and between Doug.
I think it also is it's in other parts of the city also.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I imagine it's not just the valley.
Yeah.
Once the water comes up to the ground level, it doesn't stay up here though. Sometimes it goes back into the soil. It's
just like a lizard person.
Just like a lizard person. It'll come up and get buy some postcards and go back down. This is what
Do you have any keychains?
This is what created the marshes and washes of our area. So the water has no definitive way to exit the terrain. Water seeps down and comes up to the surface when it encounters a rock mass that it can't move past, like the Santa Monica Mountains.
Or like my muscles.
Or like your muscles. It just doesn't know what to do. Like, am I supposed to soak up? And it just goes around you. That's why you can't take showers. Speaking of not taking showers, tune into Strange Angel. The overflow from this natural reservoir supplied most of the dry season flow of the river. So the water doesn't come directly from the mountain or a surface runoff. It comes from this subterranean source. This means we usually have a trickle or a slow stream for most of the dry season, and then when there's a heavy rainstorm, those river paths and channels turn into violent turbulent floods of angry dark water.
Even still, it's coming up? Like, where does the LA River now begin?
I think that the aqueduct is most of it.
But that doesn't flow into the LA River.
Doesn't it?
No.
I guess it's still an underground source.
Because I've tried to trace, because it goes right by my apartment, and it goes, right by my work.
That's the one that starts here. I don't know what Mulholland's connection to most of that is, but if you're saying it doesn't connect to it, then we still get it all from this place, which, because we're going through droughts, we get less of it.
But the river water we don't now use to drink. That drains into the ocean.
Yeah, that drains into the ocean. Yeah, it's still the same place.
I drink it. I think it's good.
It's the Arroyo Seco, which gets it from San Gabriel, I believe, if my reading's correct, and then the Santa Monica Mountains, which produces most of what goes into the reservoir.
Okay, because it's also coming from the northwest part of the valley.
Yeah, isn't that Santa Gabriel Mountains connected
I don't know.
here?
I don't know where the San Gabriel.
They do. Yeah, because one of my urban planning teachers rode his bike from Pasadena or Altadena across, and it comes over to these hills. It must connect.
I think this is runoff from the Rocketdyne meltdown.
That's what it is. Rocketdyne.
Rocketdyne and Dash.
Nah,
that's what they did after the meltdown.
We have
See you later.
Okay, so speaking of the mountain ranges, by the way, let's talk about San Gabriel Mountains, which I just did, and its relation to the LA River.
Let's talk about your professor.
What we get from, I believe, Arroyo Seco comes from San Gabriel Mountains, because those mountain ranges are so high, they receive much more precipitation, trapping more eastern moving storms. So downtown LA averages 15 inches of rain a year. So some mountain peaks in San Gabriel, they get more than 48 inches of precipitation annually. So
and they can get snow sometimes.
And they can get snow sometimes. There's snow caps. Yeah.
Ooh, they have snow caps?
Yeah.
Nonpareils? Sugar free. It's good for me, unless you eat too many. And then I'm in one pickle of a penny.
My mom won't take me to ER, and I'm begging her. I've done something horribly wrong. So the path of the LA River, as we now recognize it, it begins in an underground reservoir. As I said, it comes from Encino and trickles and meanders east along the base of the Santa Monica Mountains through present-day Universal City and Burbank before turning southeast to Griffith Park, where it follows the eastern boundary of the mountains. The Verdugo Wash in the Arroyo Seco adds to the flow during the winter months. The river reaches the coastal plain at the gap between two hills known as the Glendale Narrows, which is, if you're wondering where that's at, it's off of Western, kind of like where the 5 and 34 intertwine.
Like where Golden Road Brewery is?
Kind of, yeah. It's at 2 or 3 mile stretch right there. The Glendale Narrows, the valley's only outlet to the sea, is from this point, where the hills and the narrows on both sides bottleneck and lead south, and they go towards Legion Park, then it goes into Boyle Heights. Glendale Narrows is where the river has its greatest natural surface flow in the area. This is due to the ridge that forms the eastern extension of the Santa Monica Mountains. It dips below the ground at this point, so there's an abundance of water flow in this area between Burbank and downtown. This is the only part of the river that is not dry at least part of the year. Through this section of the river, the city was supplied for more than a century with water. After the Glendale Narrows, the river either continues through the Elysian Narrows, or it will continue towards the base of the bluffs, which became Boyle Heights, that big ridge there. If and when it continued towards downtown and the pueblo that would establish there, the river stream would become even more indefinite. It would shift and weave through South LA, splitting into what I can call sub-rivers. Pay attention, science community. The water did not connect to the ocean, like I said, so it settled into marshes and dry washes, sinking into absorbent sands and gravels. Although I also read there was a path for the river along Washington Boulevard that would go out Playa del Rey. This is now the Ballona Creek in Culver City. The Ballona wetlands area is said to be where the original people of Los Angeles first settled after leaving the Great Basin, somewhere between 9,000 BCE and 2,500 BCE.
I feel like that's not enough time back then to travel from those two places.
Yeah, no.
It took us 7,500 years, but
we got here. This is just water life and everything that water produces. It's a life essence. It's a life force. It's an element. As I mentioned before, the plant life in the area
water, the ever-flowing river.
It's what rivers are made of. The plant life in the area was lush with different types of plants. There's cottonwoods, wild grasses, willow grew along the river. There's a lot of oak trees in the area. And I didn't realize that oak trees grow acorns. And acorns are what the Keech used for everything. It was with their food that they survived on for however long they were.
Have you had acorn before?
No.
I've had it. It's pretty good.
Yeah?
I liked it. It was in elementary school, and someone made like acorn mash that natives used to eat, and it was really good.
There was once a giant sycamore tree raising 60 feet above the river, 20 feet around the trunk, that was a landmark for generations, and it grew grew from a spot that would eventually become 5th Street in downtown. This tree would be a council tree for the local tribespeople. In some areas, there was yuccas and cacti that would grow mostly in the valley. There was scattered juniper, prickly pear, and a succulent known as Our Lord's Candle, growing specifically in the valley. Animals in the area would gravitate towards the stream and marshes. At least 7 species of fish once lived in the river and its streams, and more than 100 species are represented by egg sets collected along the Alley River and its smaller waterways.
Egg sets?
Egg sets.
That's gross. Is that the tree that we talked about?
I feel like it was. I only saw like a couple mentions of it. Yeah, I feel like that was a big council tree that cursed that guy from East Side Beer.
Yeah, something like that. And it fell on his like wife or something.
I'm pretty sure that's the same tree. Birds and mountain lions would drink from the water, as would coyotes, gray foxes, and some grizzly bears and deer. And then man happened. The Keech were hunters and gatherers, and they would hunt the animals that would stop to drink water there. They would use the acorns of the oak trees that grew because of the river. 1769, when the Portola expedition comes through town, they put it in their tyranny journals. They note the water trickle that would one day become the Alley River that they could just jump over, apparently. They said it was a few feet wide. People could walk over it. It was more of a spring or a creek than a river. They stood at the confluence of the Alley River and the Arroyo Seco, which is Spanish for the dry wash, and thought, this is a pretty good place to make a pueblo. I think we'll do it here. They stood off of San Fernando Boulevard under the 5 freeway where it connects with the 110 near Lincoln Heights Jail. Just park there and walk over and you can go there. So the Spanish are in town.
Jump over the river.
Jump over the river. So the Spanish are in town, and the Keech treat them decently, and explorers are going around measuring plots and putting flags and everything, just hanging out. Portola fords the river, which is just, like I said, a small
I thought he could walk over it.
Oh, sorry. I forgot to say that it was in quotations. Fords the river, which he hops over it and names the river. He calls it Rio de Porciuncula. And it's all downhill from here. July 1781, like you said previously, King Carlos III of Spain grants the rights to the river of the town of Los Angeles. This was part of a royal charter that established a sleepy little pueblo town. 11 settler families, like 44 people was it, came to Los Angeles, were assigned by the Spanish crown to build makeshift houses out of mud and stuff. But this is where my story separates from the previous story. The Spanish crown,
the river, this is their sub-river.
This is their sub-river, yeah. Like the crown said, you settlers got to supply yourself with the fresh water. From that point, it was a whole pueblo participatory act, digging ditches, building dams, which they call a toma, which is made out of like tree trunks and brush and rocks and mud. That's what they made dams out of. This dam was built at the spot of the confluence, which you could still go to. Men and boys used shovels to construct a zanja, which is Spanish for ditch.
I'm glad you mispronounced it first, so I don't have to now.
I should have spelled it wrong, so I could have said it right. Which ran along the original plaza and then east along the new agricultural. A plaha. That's a beach.
That's plahaya.
Plahaya. Okay, so it ran east along the new agricultural fields that were growing and people were starting in Los
Agricultural
Angeles.
Park?
Yeah, that was the oldest thing in LA. Farmers dug ditches from Zanja Madre, which is the mother ditch, the main ditch, to their land and used primitive stop gates to control the flow of the water. So there was this mother ditch, and from that mother ditch, there was smaller irrigation ditches to direct water directly to people's stuff. People living around the missions would collect water in ollas, which are water jugs.
Eyes?
Oh, yes. Close, though. Kids can often be splashing around in the Zanja. Many were using it as a bathtub. It was also used as an unofficial, get ready for this, unofficial sewer, a streaming washing machine.
Please remember to go upstream when you...
As far as go to Burbank. A streaming washing machine and a giant trash can like Daniel treats the current day river.
It's right behind my apartment. I'm not going to throw my old microwaves in it.
Oh, I missed.
I'm so strong, I threw it over the dumpster. I could put it in the dumpster. I could do that easy. I like to put it in the river.
I like to see what happens.
The ducks make houses out of it.
Zanjas were usually about 3 feet wide and about a foot or so deep, running about 5 miles per hour, which in those days was about 1/4 per mile. Now,
fastest thing they've ever seen.
When a quarter mile, you can get chips, a gallon of milk, or right on the trolley. They completed the Zanja Madre in October of that year. The ditch was split into 2 paths. One ran behind the settlers' homes and carried water for domestic needs. The other ran more south and brought water to the fields and to the pobladores. They could maintain crops and stuff. The Keech somehow supplied more fresh water for domestic use rather than the stagnant Zanja, and thus they capitalized on this.
So they had a better source.
Probably had a better source.
The lizard people.
Hey, what do you want?
Do you have Dasani?
You smart water down there? It's just colder. It gets colder. I don't know why. The first ditch, the one for domestic needs, was used so little after the Keech were getting better water for people that it doesn't even show up on the map of the time. After that, there was 9 tributary Zanjas flowing from the mother ditch to provide irrigation water to different districts throughout Los Angeles. This water supplies the grapes for the vineyards, which they did in 1803, and the orange groves in 1815. Grain and moss were the first 2 cash crops that were...
Grain and what?
Corn.
Oh, maize.
Maize.
That's That's the Spanish translation of Borat.
Borot. They were the first two cash crops that we had. Orchards and vineyards and gardens flourished, as we know already. The water made this all possible.
Essence of life.
Essence of life. As the Pueblo settlement grew, local government took over the management of the water supply from the citizens. The water was such an important aspect that the men hired to take care of the ditches as Narrows became one of the more important figures of this era, as important as the mayor. In one reading I read that they made even more money than the mayor did. They had a god time.
Unions.
So this was
not in my fascist America.
So agriculture at this time was a mainstay for our area because commerce and real estate, before they took over, it was all just producing crops and stuff like that. And whatever you can grow, that's how you made money. So the zanjas in the river were essential to the growth of the city. But the zanjas were open ditches, so it was 100% vulnerable to the elements, sicknesses, dead animals, poo-poo water, stagnation. It was kind of gross.
Not the poo-poo animals.
It was okay for growing whatever, but like domestic use, like taking baths and stuff, if you weren't going to jump in the river and being a jerk, then it was kind of hard to get drinking water. And then the 19th century hits. With it comes the true villain of the story, a villain that was heavily featured in one of our first episodes, floods, and lots of them.
The villain we can never quite beat, nature.
Nature. In 1815, the Ali River floods washed away the original Pueblo de los Angeles. 10 years later, 1825, there was another giant flood that caused swamps to form between the Pueblo and the ocean, causing the river to flow more south in its current location. Yeah. Water everywhere, but gets them in my house. Problems abound for the city despite this fact that they kept growing and expanding. Many citizens complained that Zanja Madre was now inefficient for the blossoming metropolis. It's only 1836, but people were like, there's more people and we're expanding and there's all these ranches and how we get water to these people.
It just keeps flooding our houses.
Yeah, it keeps flooding
our house. My doormat keeps getting wet.
My doormat keeps washing away with my house and my door. In 1836, the town council had a solution. Round up drunk Native Americans and make them work on the ditch until we got more water.
What?
That was their solution to how they're going to get more water for the bigger city.
Turn them into water.
Whether that was put into effect, I don't know, but sometimes...
Make them work and don't let them drink water. That way we have more water.
That way, yeah. No, can't you drink something else? Things carried on like this through 1848 when the Mexicans lost Alta California and the Pueblo to those, we don't need to stick in anything Americans. United States are bust. How about United States and bust? At this point, the American bureaucracy...
If you want to see some bust in the United States, tune into...
At this point, the American bureaucracy and the capitalistic insanity took hold in Los Angeles. The government structure was somewhat kept in place, and the city council had control over the management and distribution of the water supply. I'm not sure which states that Toma was replaced with wooden structures, but it happens around this time. Between the 1850s and 1860s, the city council tries to understand how it could use a natural life force such as water and exploit and abuse it. Well, there was an arrangement where the mayor and the council, after granting a contract in currency for digging a ditch to expand the water system, would in reality pay the contractor with municipal acreage. What does that mean? We'll give you land if you allow us to expand the water system. Instead of paying you money so we can spend on water, we'll just give you land. That was how much land was going around. Grateful, the contractor would then kick back a fraction thereof to the mayor and each member of the council. That was blatant fat cat back scratching, and it was so known during that time.
Were any of them handsome? They sound like criminals.
I'll look up George Hansen. During one
George Hansen.
During that one city council hearing, civil engineer George Hansen hung up a tract map for examination, and in front of the council went over certain parts of the tract map with a red pen and said, this tract was stolen when Mayor B was up. This tract was stolen when Mayor C was in charge. And finally, on the largest of all the areas, displaying on the small map what covered thousands of acres, said, this tract was stolen by Joel H. Turner when he became mayor. That was the current mayor. So he's basically in front of the city council like, this is what this guy before him got, this is what the guy before him got, and this is what our current mayor has. In 1857, the technology for the
water... They all looked at him and he has like misters on him.
What? No, what are you talking about? Misters. I didn't know what you meant at first, and I missed
I mistered the joke.
Yeah. In 1857, the technology for the water system takes a step forward when a large water wheel was installed that could bring water
from the Santa Madre
onto the main brick reservoir. Every time I see pictures, I think like, oh, a carnival with a Ferris wheel. I'm like, no, it's not that. Like, they don't write that.
They've combined the flume ride with the Wonder Wheel. Interesting.
Around this time is when the first waterworks start in Los Angeles, a precursor to the idea of a local utility. The waterworks was in charge of managing the flow of the Los Angeles River and using that... John Ritter. And using that water to supply the town from the zanjas or ditches. Private water trucks would deliver water to the homes for the LA River. Around this time, the first domestic water company was found in LA, and the first reservoir was built in the town plaza in 1860.
Wait a minute. So it wasn't like, there wasn't flowing water in the homes? It was kind of like sparklets?
I guess so, yeah. Okay. It was private water trucks coming and bringing you stuff as opposed to you going out there and getting it. Plus, because you had to, as I'll get to, had to buy a permit for water usage. So I imagine the delivery was part of that. They also constructed a large brick and wood storage tank in the center of the city plaza. For another 40-something years, private water companies controlled domestic water use. So water was taken from from the river by private water companies who found a way to monetize it. They would take it from the Zanjas and the LA River, while the Zanjas continued to supply all the water used for agricultural and landscaping purposes. One of the key figures in the privatization of water is Prudent Beaudry, who we'll get to in a second. Another way to get water delivered to your home was to have a massive terrain-altering flood wash through your city, as LA had done in 1861 and 1862, as they had done. These floods transformed much of the Central Valley and the LA Basin into the inland sea. We talked about this in the flood episode. We were basically all underwater for like a couple months. The riverbanks, the Zanjas, the Tomas, a lot of the structures that they made to control water, every time there's a giant flood, all that stuff has to wash away, so they have to start over. Life is hard when you live. Getting back to private water companies, there were many attempts from 1848, when California became a United States, up to and around 1868, where private ventures tried to get the rights and management of distribution of domestic water. The most successful attempt happens in March of 1868. It happens by a man named Prudent Beaudry and his company, the Canal and Reservoir Company. His partners in the company were Dr. John Griffin and Solomon Lazard, which I kept saying Salamander Lazard.
Salamander Lizard.
Salamander Lizard, which is a name that I'm like, don't spell that. Beaudry was a French-Canadian who had a reputation in the city as someone who had both made a fortune and lost a fortune. He came to LA in 1850 after having been in San Francisco during the gold rush. I don't know if I imagine that's where he got his fortune and also lost his fortune. Now he was in Los Angeles for our gold rush, which was real estate picking. He bought a dry piece of land near downtown and called it Bellevue Tract, which if I'm reading correctly, covered everything from like Echo Park to where Central Library is on 5th and Flower.
Prudent.
Yeah. It was funny when I was doing the research because my high school is on Beaudry Street in downtown. I'm like, Beaudry. Nah, they're not connected. The city grants him additional land to build a dam west and northwest of Figueroa Street, which seems like Elysian Park. It might be Echo Park. They kept talking about Echo Park, and I'm pretty sure they mean the lake, but they don't say Echo Park Lake, so I'm like, I don't know what they mean.
I could see that whole area put a dam from the top of Baxter to like where Dodger Stadium is.
That's why the hill's so tall. So he requires a dam because the Zanjas only send water to the central district and around the plaza and then south, but nothing comes on this side of town. This would be the first dam built westward for the westward movement of the river. The president of the Canal and Reservoir Company is our old friend from the city council meeting, George Hansen. So CRC, Canal and Reservoir Company, buys the old Feliz ditch and the water rights to Feliz Rancho, which was closer to the Glendale Narrows, 6 miles northwest of downtown. I imagine that's Los Feliz. Their planned water route was down what is now Glendale Boulevard through the spot where the Silver Lake Reservoir now stands, then emptied into the Echo Park Lake. Or it wasn't a lake at the time, but it was a dam. To do this, they would improve the Zanja, the water flow, widen the ditch, create a canyon through the hill by either cutting it or tunneling through it, and then onto the plains and into the dam. The Echo Park Lake previously was called the Beaudry's High Dam or the Woolen Ditch Dam, part of Reservoir 4. So there was an extension from Echo Park Lake, and it went to present-day Bonaventure Hotel, which is on 5th and Figueroa. That's all the land he owned. So here's the thing. So the water dropped some 70 feet from the dam to the ditch. The Bernard brothers, who are brick makers, conceived the idea of building a wool mill on the site to take advantage of the power, and this created the first industrial plant in the city of Los Angeles. So Beaudry, Griffin, and Lazard are like, we made a spectacular water deal in the city. We're feeling hot and on a roll. Let's see if we can get all the rights to the water for the city and get it away from the municipality, the local government. And they almost kind of did. They proposed to the city council a 50-year lease on the water rights, which apparently, from what I'm reading, would have resulted in the sale of the waterworks and the stripping of the city's rights to fix, control, and manage water rates. It came down to a tie vote, but there was a tiebreaker when the president of the council broke the tie voting vote in favor of the lease. The mayor at the time, Don Cristobal Aguilar, vetoed the ordinance, ending that particular vote.
Wait, the mayor's name was Don Christopher?
Don Cristobal Aguilar.
What year was this?
1868.
And there was a Don? Was his name like Donald, or was it like Don Francisco?
I didn't look into him. He was the mayor. He could have just been a Don as well.
Don't question him.
Don't question it.
It could be D-A-W-N.
I just accepted it as it was because I wasn't thinking about his name could also be a title.
Mayor Don, Mr.
No,
Mayor Don.
Mayor's my name.
Who's on first?
So they don't get their way. 50-year lease, it's a bust. How about a 30-year lease? So they come back to the city council with a 30-year lease at $1,500 a year, which included services provided such as fire hydrants, free water in city buildings, and the construction of an ornamental fountain in the plaza that would cost $1,000. So then the council went for it. Votes stacked.
2/3 of their budget.
The council totally went for it. Votes stacked in favor of Beaudry and crew. They love this idea, but almost immediately the council members were being called out for their political favoritism as they discovered that two members of the city council went in for the lease, William Perry and A.J. King. Soon afterwards, they became members of the water company's board of trustees, which was formed right after the 30-year lease was secured. And to be extra nefarious, after the lease is complete, Beaudry, Lazard, and Griffin changed the name of the Canal and Reservoir Company to the Los Angeles City Water Company, being like, nah, we got it in.
If you can't beat them, vote for them and then join them.
Yeah. Mayor Aguilar, who was against this lease but lost out to the votes, insisted that the mayor and the council would retain the rights to the regular water rates, which was all they seemed to half at the end of this deal. So the city of LA wasn't completely stripped of its power to manage the water supply, but it was going to be a fight that it would have year to year every time they had a city council meeting, like an annual one. Of course, the lease did not benefit the city at all. The company prospered, fat cats gaining weight, water became a prized possession.
It's mostly water weight, though.
It's mostly water weight. And the services went completely stagnant, for loss of a better word. Politicians who could get in on the company in exchange for keeping the lease alive took contributions, of course. There was even a point where the city demanded that the company remove an abandoned reservoir from the plaza and build a fountain that they all wanted. And they ended up waiting 2 years for this. And when the city was fed up and said, yo, where's our plaza fountain? The company threatened the city council with a lawsuit. So the city council had to agree to reduce the annual rent of the water to $400 a year if the company would move forward with the fountain. The company then tore down the old brick reservoir, landscaped the plaza, and built the fountain.
So that fountain... There's no fountain in the plaza.
Yeah, there is.
There's a gazebo.
It's along the long walkway where all the shops are. There's a fountain there.
Oh, yeah. That tiny thing costs $1,000?
I mean, it was different back then. I'm wondering if that's the fountain. I'm like, how many fountains are there? I think that's the only fountain that I know of. But it's not ornamental.
No.
It's very functional.
It's a fountain.
It's a regular... It's more of a well. I'm trying to think of like a big fountain that's at the plaza. That's the only one I can think of, though.
There's that one that people sit on and eat. I'll sit there and eat a taquito.
Or a tahito. Drink a tejuino. The company kept building...
Kick back and have a nice glass of ammonia.
The company kept building reservoirs throughout the city. There was the Buena Vista Reservoir near Main and First. Another one that was built in Angelino Heights, which I believe Beaudry was daddy to Angelino Heights. They expanded the water service to Lincoln Heights and continued laying lines and pumping water. Beaudry stepped down as the president of the...
So would you say they laid pipe?
Beaudry stepped down as president of the LA Water Company. Thank you for asking. And in his place now was John Downey, who we remember from several episodes. He was a former governor of California. Beaudry was busy being mayor of LA in 1875. He completed his waterworks and reservoirs in 1878 when some young Irish thug got a job for his company. Backtrack a little bit. 1873, the Zanjas were being repurposed for all sorts of things that a body of water could be used for. The town council had to issue an ordinance basically saying, stop throwing crap in the ditches, don't bathe or wash your clothes in it, and keep your gross animals out of the water. Who didn't like this was all the locals who were doing that. In protest, some people of our great city would dig out private pools under trees and fill them with illegally channeled water from the mother ditch. The banks of the rivers, imagine this.
I'm going to rub my dirty tushy in this if it's the last thing I do.
You see what I do with all this water. The banks of the river, imagine this, were once green and natural and would act as parts like Main Street America, Romantic, Huck Finn, and Tom Sawyer sitting on this thing. The Chinese residents would steal wild celery growing along the river, which was illegal.
Celery was growing along the river?
That's what I read.
I can't blame them.
It's food. And children would rest under the streets along the bank, having been tired from taking a swim, also illegal. The following year, the city...
Just kick back and have a piece of celery.
The following year, the city started trying to cite illegal activity. Zanjeros, they're now called water overseers because now we're in America, try to find people for being gross with the water and misusing it. So they patrol the Zanja system. Part of your job as Zanjanero was to visit those who had obtained water permits twice a day to make sure that they weren't abusing the water supply. They had to stop all illegal trading of claims. They had to arrest people who didn't have city-issued water permits stating that they had paid for the usage of the water. The permit showed that you paid for water, so if you were there without a permit, you got arrested. He also would arrest anyone bathing in the water, anyone polluting the water, you get arrested. He had the ability to arrest you, this water overseer. Also, along with that, the city declared war on upstream water users. They use an injunction, in quotations, which was an order from the city council to cease and desist from doing something not illegal by statute at law, but harmful to someone else, therefore illegal under the case law, meaning court-made law, embodied in the venerable law of equity. So if you're doing something upstream and we don't like it, we could just... They would do stuff like they were in Rancho Los Feliz, and if you're in Rancho Los Feliz and you were abusing water upstream from the plaza, the city would have the water diverted before it came to you to irrigate.
So they make the river would now flow around you?
Around it, yeah. Finally, in 1877, the city got tired of the dangers and inconveniences of the open-air zanjas and decided to cover up the ditch with bricks, making a sort of tunnel or pipe with the zanjas. Let's quickly discuss two of my favorite reasons to close up the open-air zanja. Kids and drunks were drowning in the water. You know how we hear about Cecil Hotel and the brown water people drank? That was Elise Salem's dead body. Imagine that, but more frequent. Listen, I'm all for poor people bathing. I'm not one of those people who are like, only people with a home can be clean. But the smallpox outbreak really hit the Mexican community and the Quiche real hard, almost like it actively chose them. And then when they were feeling ill, they'd be like, I don't feel good. I'm going to take a bath in river. I don't know how smallpox travels. If it travels and it's waterborne.
By raft.
If you have smallpox and you bathe in river, that can't be good for other
These lesions keep coming off of me. This river's really helping.
The polluting of the river and the zanjas and the water supply were all problem at the dawn of the 1880s because the city was on the verge of transforming from a sleepy little Pueblo town to an American city. That was like the first boom we had. And for that, we needed an efficient and clean water system. We didn't have an adequate amount of water. They didn't know that we were about to get a big boom, but we didn't have enough water even for what we had. So more people coming in, we needed more water and more reliable water to help the city grow. In 1884, there was improvements made to the mother ditch. There was a replacement with a brick conduit of 3 to 3.5 feet diameter ending at First Street. That was used when people were moving in, but it still wasn't enough. They changed to cogstone. That was determined that they used like a 75-foot long section of Zan.
That's the cousin of the clock from Beauty and the Beast, right?
Yeah, that's exactly. You nailed it.
Who's also a relative. Nailed it. So then in March of 1884, after a record-setting winter, there was another flood. It hit the newcomers to the city the hardest. One newly built house... My doormat.
One newly built housing tract next to the river virtually swept away. Pio Pico, the last governor of Mexican California...
He got swept away.
His beloved El Ranchito Hacienda was hit by the flood and almost destroyed. The flood swept away bridges, the railroad tracks, homes. The wooden dams were completely destroyed. The channels were destroyed.
My ideas of old floods is always the scene from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? So
oh, yeah, absolutely.
Guy on a rolly desk.
It's a hot day. You look up, there's a mountain of water. Now all of us are underwater.
Cow on a roof.
Cow on a roof. It was a cow on a roof. You're a pretty smart guy.
I know cows.
I know what they like to do, and they like to be marooned.
I know a few cows. One of them's name is Tiburcio Vasquez.
You're a mean person, and you have a bad heart. But
my doctor says otherwise. He says I'm a good person.
At least that was the last flood. January 1886, a storm with a colossal wind and mean as heck flood burst through everything in its path. River paths and homes and livestock
doormats.
And people and doormats were all swept away. A lot of animals and folks were marooned. In this story comes one hero, Deputy Sheriff Martin Aguirre, apparently one-eyed lawman, but I've seen pictures. He has both eyes. He was famous for his aim with a knife. He was sent to
his aim. What?
Okay, two things I read from Alley Times article about him. They called him a one-eyed lawman, and I saw pictures of him like that's 2 eyes. My counting's not great, but that's 2.
Maybe you're the one with one eye.
Oh no! Yeah, and you didn't tell me.
No one tell Greg. He's missing.
Who's the director with one eye? Is it John Ford?
Oh yeah, I think so.
I'm John Ford.
Well, I'm him.
I'm John Ford. And also, the same sentence said he was famous for his aim with this knife.
What does that mean? You can't have one eye. Oh, so he throws the knife?
It, yeah.
So how good could it... I mean, one eye and you're throwing
Maybe
a knife?
you're good for someone with one eye.
Maybe.
I don't know. Saying someone is famous for his aim doesn't mean he was good. He was it could have been famously bad. He was said to have stood on the crumbling bank of the Alley River as a raging torrent of water surged down the channel, and as homes came swimming down First Street with families marooned on the rooftops, Aguirre repeatedly charged into the river on his white horse El Capitan to pull out victims.
Of course, it was a white horse.
He plunged into the flood waters to rescue people. He saved 19 people that day from drowning.
Really?
On his 20th plunge into the dark, mean waters, he pulled a little girl onto his horse who was hanging on the window of a house. She's being carried away. Then El Capitan struck a partially submerged picket fence, and the 3 of them toppled into the water. Aguirre only had time to throw the girl onto a fence. As he came ashore at 7th Street and returned to find the girl, she was gone. He would grieve this loss for the rest of his life. But the city considered him a hero, which is what he is. He was elected sheriff in 1888, LA's first Latino sheriff.
Really?
The Los Angeles Bar, which I imagine is a bar association, recognized his courageous acts and granted him a gold watch and chain with the inscription Los Angeles Bar to Martin Aguirre for bravery. So that's nice. Also, the night of the
bravery.
Also, the night of the flood. I read this and I thought, Daniel's going to like this a lot. The First Street Bridge fell, trapping 2 horses in the middle, and a rescue party fed them from a rowboat for several days until the bridge was repaired.
That's sad, but also I would love that job. Emergency horse feeder.
Get in the rowboat with all those carrots. Oh, anything you want.
I've been training for this.
A rescue carrot. I said that wrong.
A carrot package?
Yeah, carrot. Oh my God. Damn it, that was it. I led you to it. Layups. That's how we work.
I dunked, man.
You
may be Kobe, but I'm Wayne Gretzky.
So by the late 1880s, in the midst of the first population movement in LA, the city planned to put pipes in the remaining and seemingly outdated Zanjas, but money issues slowed this process down. Outdated because it couldn't really keep up with the expansion of the city. Like I said, we're expanding in all directions at this point, and it was still being used. There was 52 miles of Zanjas, half open earth and half concrete, and they ran within the city limits. An additional 40 miles of Zanjas ran outside of the city proper, but by the 1890s, it was becoming more clear that it needed to be replaced altogether, although they would continue to function as the city water mains or municipal water drains. So they were still finding some use. Just carrying water for not domestic purposes was not going to work anymore. With the real estate boom, commerce takes over agriculture as a law of the land. Obviously, water was crucial in survival of both. So now, instead of ranches and fields of agriculture, land was being utilized for homes and shops and factories. So water was being used differently now. The shift in land use...
Essence of life.
The shift in land use followed 2 decades of abandonment of public canals and the acceptance of private companies as a means to supply water to homes or businesses. Good water, quotations, was sold door to door in jugs and buckets and later horse-drawn water carts. Open ditches were a thing of the past that's just that's gross. That's where small bulky people swim. Another concern was that the adobe structures were being replaced by wood frame buildings now, and fire was a possibility to purify all. So the city needed water for fire protection now. Also, the citizens and the city council were aching to move back to the city of Los Angeles, retaining the rights over the water rates, management, and distribution. They're still trying to do that. Finally, in 1902, the reign of complete control over the water by private companies was over, somewhat over. The city of Los Angeles purchased the LA City Water Company for $2 million. The private domestic enterprise, the Los Angeles City Water Company, and the public water system were forged, creating the Los Angeles Municipal Water Department, putting a significant portion of power over the water supply back in the city's hands. Now they own 6 reservoirs, 2 pumping plants, 337 miles of pipes that led to 23,180 individual water services. By ordinance, the city council establishes a new 7-member board of water commissioners. Board members are elected for 2-year terms. So this system of government was set just for the water now, which is pretty cool. The following year, an up-and-coming ambitious Danero, who would go unnamed in this segment, he was making markings for his job and showed it poor showings for the year. He was citing receipts of $5,800 and expenditures of upkeep of $8,000. He recommended abandoning the mother ditch, the old system. The following year, Zanja Madre was abandoned.
What year was that?
1904.
You got to leave mother eventually.
No.
No, you don't.
No, not true. 1904, pumping wells depleted local aquifers at a time when California was the leading agricultural state. Then in 1914, there's another monster flood, and the water flow coming.
Monster
flood. Come out this weekend for doormats.
Hang on to your doormats. We got a monster flood.
Oh, there's a monster flood.
Can I say it again?
Monster flood. The water flow coming to the city equaled that of the Colorado River. It caused $10 million in damages throughout the city, and this time the city was not happy living in this much danger of a flood. Harvey danger of the flood. The citizens were now calling for action against the torrents of flood ruining the city. The following year, the LA County Flood Control District was formed. Some early flood control efforts included the channelization of some portions of the river and the building of more reservoirs. Taxpayers approved bond issues in 1917 and 1924 to build the initial major dams. However, taxpayers were not willing to provide enough funds for substantial infrastructure downstream of the dams. What do we need to convince these people? How about a worse flood than most of the other ones? That we can do. And that arrived in the 1930s when the simple folk of this country had so little possessions through the Depression that they couldn't afford to have things be washed away.
All I have is my doormat.
Please, Lord, I've been praying to you. Please let me have my doormat. No.
Monster
flood. Bring your doormat. Monster flood. There are 2 huge floods in the 30s, as you've covered before. One in 1934, and the granddaddy of them all. One so bad, Woody Guthrie had to write a song about it. 1938 New Year's flood that washed homes from Monrovia out to San Pedro, and the ridiculous completely rerouted the LA River, finally giving the exit that it so desperately wanted. It was time, many people felt, to channelize the LA River and get some flood control measures in. Federal assistance was requested by the city and the Army Corps of Engineers. They led the charge in channelizing the river. Concreting began in 1938, I imagine 2 days after the flood. And by October of that year, work on 3 projects. They wanted to lower the river's bed 20 feet. They wanted to widen the channel and pave the banks for a little over about 4 miles from Elysian Park. By December, January, construction was complete on the first segment, would eventually be a continuous trapezoidal concrete channel to carry the river to the ocean. By 1960, the project was completed to form a 51-mile engineered waterway from the valley out to the ocean in Long Beach. This is our river now. So the next time you say, it's not even, how can you call that? It's concrete. We need it to be this way.
You're lucky. It's just concrete.
Yeah, there was like a century where it wasn't, and everyone just kept getting swept away.
Doormats.
Look up the flood.
You like your precious doormats?
Yeah, you like your doormats? Look up the flood of 1886 and the New Year's flood, and you'll get why we need a concrete path. Only 3 portions of the water channel remain unpaved. The Sepulveda Flood Control Basin in the Santa Ana Valley.
It's nice also.
Is it?
Yeah. Because if you're driving on whatever street that is, that goes right over it, there's like animals. It's crazy. It's like this wild wilderness, and you can kayak down it.
That sounds nice. I like that.
My God. That sounds nice.
God. My robot heart loves that. Near Griffith Park through Elysian Valley, where some groundwater levels prevent it from being paved, and the river near Long Beach, a part of the river near Long Beach, which when it empties into the ocean is not paved. There are now bike paths along the river for portions of it, and with the Olympics coming in 2024, developers are clamoring to build housing structures along the riverbanks to accommodate people.
That's the history of the river itself. Mine's going to overlap and
hope so.
and underlap a little bit.
Tell me about this young Irish thug.
There was one character that stuck out to me. Who's playing the part of young Irish thug tonight?
I should tell you before you continue. I mean, my girlfriend spent the weekend trying to find the one exposed part of Zana Madre, and we finally found it.
And what does it look like?
It's brick. It looks old. It looks haunted. It's sticking out of the ground.
It's still got smallpox in it.
It's still got smallpox. It's basically if you're on Chinatown and you look down to where Historical Park ends and it meets Chinatown, there's like a part where the Metro owns this because the Metro goes first. It's elevated, then it hits the ground. Or it doesn't hit the ground. It descends.
Hits the ground running.
Hit the ground running. There's like an area right there, like a little triangle area, and it's no historical markers.
Yeah.
Nothing for it.
Well,
they make a big deal about it. Like there's a plaza in Chinatown that they have like a brick walkway, and then bricks facing an opposite direction that show you where the waterway used to go. Same thing happens on Arroyo Street. There's a path that leads to that well or the fountain or whatever.
Beautiful
ornamental well. They obviously have an appreciation for the old water system, but here's a piece of it, and they don't care. Yeah.
Well, that's what wasn't Michael Holland when we went to the archive. He was
talking about
he was like, well, they dug some up, and anyone could just run and grab some.